All right. Oh, good. You can hear me. Well, thanks so much for having us. I'm very privileged to introduce this esteemed panel of licensed distributors in California with very diverse business models. And this group here is, I think, a really solid representation of kind of the diversity in our market here in California. But many of them also have kind of a global vision, a national vision. So I'm excited for them to get to share that with you. And on this panel, we'll really be talking about what makes distribution work here in California, and I think that applies to most places around the state, how we achieve kind of an efficient marketplace, and we'll talk about the competitive and collaborative landscape for cannabis distribution. So before we get into all that, I'd love the opportunity to have you all introduce yourselves and share a little bit about your company.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Coulomb. I'm the CEO of Pacific Expeditors. We are a statewide distribution operation that provides sales, warehousing, and logistics all the way from Oregon border to San Diego.
Hello, Felipe Recalde. I'm the SVP of Technology and co-founder of Rise Logistics. We do third-party logistics for brands that have their own sales team, and then we have a full-service distribution branch statewide that also provides for our portfolio brands that we have sales as a service.
Hello, my name is Wesley Hine, and I want to say one thing. This is without a doubt the most comfortable panel chair I have ever sat in on one of these. I'm glad I'm not at the 5 p.m. panel. So I apologize for slouching. I'm with Mammoth Distribution, but before I get that, and I warned Lauren I might do this, as I often answer the question, not that was asked, but that I wish was asked. And I was at an earlier panel, and they said something, which was, if you've taken the time, energy, and money to come to this, and you haven't reached out to your senators or your congressmen or your elected officials and asked them, pleaded with them, demanded them to address whatever ills are faced in your jurisdiction, whether it's 280E, total illegality, or whatever, then you have it backwards. And that's something that I implore you, as I implore myself, to address right away. And when you get back, start reaching out to those people. That's what we need, as much as distribution. Now for distribution, we're Mammoth Distribution. We're pretty good sized. We have 6 licenses. One thing we do is a little different is that instead of carrying a variety of products, we focus on just one, which is vape. That's not to say that we don't think the other categories are important. They are fun. They really are. It's just with all of the changes and advocacy and education that is necessary in this market of tumult, we felt that we'd be best served by just focusing on one thing and trying to do that really well. And we carry 5 currently brands, vape brands, all distinct. Our flagship brand is called Heavy Hitters.
Awesome. Hey everyone, my name is Michael Steinmetz. I'm the CEO and one of the founders of Flowcana. Best way to describe Flowcana is we are a supply chain company that focuses exclusively with small farmers from the Emerald Triangle, only sun-grown, organic, sustainable products. We have 2 big components to our business. One is an upstream processing and manufacturing, and then we have a downstream distribution company. On the distribution side, we've got a hub in San Diego, 2 hubs in LA, Sacramento, and the Bay Area, so about 5 hubs across the state. And on the upstream side of things, we have a couple aggregation hubs in kind of densely populated areas where farmers are. We have one in southern Humboldt, one in northern Mendocino. We're opening a 3rd one in southern Mendocino as well. And we, about 2 years ago, bought the Fetzer winery in Ukiah, and we're turning it into a centralized processing center to provide all the services at scale for the small farmers. So they can cultivate their product, dry it and cure it on farm, estate cured, and then we do everything else, the trimming, the processing, the packaging, manufacturing, and then the downstream distribution. And that's us.
Great, thank you. Well, let's kick off with a really kind of open-ended first question, which is tell us about the distribution landscape in California and what that looks like, and maybe incorporate some of the ways in which distributors work with one another and work within the supply chain. So let's see, Mikey, would you mind kicking us off?
For sure. let's see. It's certainly a challenging time in California, right? There's about as many distributors as there are licensed retailers. It's like a 1-to-1 ratio. We're also emerging from a world where a lot of distributors did, or a lot of brands, because there didn't exist a distribution network in the past, have built their own self-distribution components to their business. So there's a lot of us in the marketplace. I say it's a pretty amicable and collaborative environment, but I wish it was more collaborative, to be honest. And you know, it's an interesting time. You know, I think this year is probably going to bring about a lot of consolidation in the industry, both on the brand side and the distribution side. It's going to be interesting to see how it all kind of shakes out and who the winners are that emerge. But you know, as this industry matures and more cultivation comes online, the margins compress, and distribution is not a very easy game, right? When you have to do it in this regulatory landscape, tons of rules, very high capex investments on the real estate, on the truck side. So you know, I think what we're going to see this year is unfortunately, probably some distributors disappearing or joining forces with other people, because it's definitely not enough room for the number of distributors that exist today. So that's one of the things that we're working on consciously, is actually trying to come together with a lot of distribution companies and kind of protect the California values and the California brands that for so long have been part of this industry, and finding ways to work together more intimately.
Well, I think it's difficult to talk about the distribution environment in 2019 without going back to 2017. Because notwithstanding the comment I say to people all the time, we're like any other distribution company in any other industry. In 2017, we couldn't be like any other distribution company, because if we distributed and actually distributed, that was called trafficking. That was very illegal. So instead, what we did was we formed mutual benefit corporations, cooperatives, nonprofit, and we facilitated transaction amongst member patients of the collective. Try putting that on your LinkedIn. I tried. And so we had this, that was the downside. The upside was we had a couple of thousand potential clients to sell to in terms of retailers and dispensary and delivery services. Then on 1/1/2018, boom, that got cut by about 75% to just a few hundred. That type of tumult was very difficult to navigate. And as we reoriented our business and reoriented the brands and so forth towards now this segment, started building those, we got to July 1st, the date all of us will remember here. The BCC told retailers, okay, as of July 1, if we catch you with any non-compliant inventory, you're in trouble. Well, hilarity ensued, because 350 or so licensed retailers each had a different opinion as to what compliant inventory was. Is that appropriate contrasting color? Is that the lower third, and so forth? And so navigating all of that, and then we almost had, again, at the end of the year with the heavy metal testing, where let's test all products for heavy metal, but let's only have a few labs that are really up to the task. So these are the things that we dealt with in 2018. Now that we're getting to 2019, we've overcome those. We now have permanent regulations. It's interesting, most people think permanent means they're not going to change. Permanent, in this case, means they're going to change, but apparently a little bit more slowly, according to the BCC, and that's a good thing. So I think all of the things that my fellow distributor on the right said is exactly right. We're going to see increased competition. We're going to see the types of things that probably would have expected last year, but we were just dealing with the tumult.
If no other comments, we can move on to the next question, which is related. So what are some of your big takeaways from 2018, really as it pertains to what makes a winning partnership between producers and distributors and or retailers and distributors? So really thinking about it from a perspective of what makes partnerships work in this new environment that we are all in a new regulated environment with all those changes that Wesley outlined. Felipe, would you like to start?
Sure. So we look at partnership very much so that we are in this lane of distribution, and brands can focus on their manufacturing or their cultivation. And so for us, being able to provide the services with a very specific focus and being the most efficient partner possible, we're flexible around the partnership. So if brands want to represent themselves, we're of the belief that nobody tells their story better than themselves. So we allow the brands to go out and build their sales teams and rep themselves. And then if they're ready to share the story and allow us to go out and represent, then we've got sales as a service, and we'll build a team. We really get to know the brand. We know what drives them, what their DNA is like, and we're out on the field wearing their gear day in and day out. We have a lot of pride in that. So that's it.
I think it's just furthering Felipe's comments. It's also understanding that we have our own very specific and respective function, but at the same time, we're all basically standing there on the same team. And so what that means is we don't look at why this person should be in a store or this person should not be in a store. It's really making sure that whatever it is that you put together as a plan is very well defined and well executed. I think it's the main point is making sure that everybody is relying on their core competencies and that you very well understand what those respective core competencies are.
And that also means we work together a lot. So we call each other. We end up working with different clients. After SB 311 passed, thank you, Lauren, we've been able to do distributor-to-distributor transactions. So it's opened up to some of the local aggregators in various regions of the state that are further out to partner up, source, get everything retail ready, and then we do the last mile delivery for them.
Any other big takeaways in terms of what makes a winning partnership?
Well, we could probably do the entire panel on that, but I think it's really understanding, and I'm building on what Philippe had said, it's mutual dependence. No matter how good a distributor is at logistics, it's out of business if it doesn't have good products, and it doesn't make those products. So brands have a tremendous amount of leverage on that. That said, if a brand has products and it's not in a dispensary and does not have a good footprint in those dispensaries, it's out of business. So it's really looking for the areas where they can work together and collaborate. I think the number one thing a distributor should ask its brands is, how can we do a better job of representing your products? The number one thing the brands should ask their distributors is, what are you hearing from dispensaries about our products, our packaging, our messaging that we can improve to make your job easier?
Great, thank you. Let's talk about what is a distributor's role in the supply chain beyond some of the kind of logistical and functional things that you've mentioned, and kind of around the idea of their role in terms of creating demand. Is it a distributor's role to create demand, or does that fall more on the brand, or is it a shared effort? If you could speak to that.
Sure. I mean, I think to the point made earlier, there's different kinds of relationships with the different brands, and different distributors have different models. I think, besides the logistics, besides the sale, besides transportation, warehousing, the traditional functions, we're also, the state's tax collection agency. I consider ourselves also kind of an information hub. We kind of sit in the middle of cultivators, manufacturers, retailers, delivery services. We know all of those pain points, and we take it upon ourselves to, really help all the other pieces of the supply chain, on some of the trade organizations that we sit on the boards, CCIA, and the others. I think, in general, the relationship with the distributor to really build a marketplace. Speaking about ourselves, we're not trying to be a large catalog distributor with thousands of products. We want to build an intimate relationship with a select few of curated, category-winning brands. And, we try to find and associate ourselves with brands that, for one, can scale. A lot of people are struggling with scaling beyond the real estate that they're in, or with lack of capital. So we find the right brands that have that ability to scale. And if they don't have it themselves, but we love the brand or love the founding team, we try to help them with the capital, and we try to help them with our real estate footprint as well. I think in terms of developing the marketplace, we do have a very close relationship with the brands where we actually help them with a lot of the marketing activities. We run merchandising teams. We run brand ambassador teams for them. We have specific campaigns that we do together collaboratively with them. A distributor's success really depends entirely on the brand, right? You're linked by the hip. And I think it's very important for that relationship to be kind of win-win. And the distributors, in our case, we are building a lot of market share for the brands we work with, but we also leverage a lot of their marketing campaigns that they do. I'm not sure if all the other distributors do the same.
You can say.
Oh, I was going to say, aside from the tax collection, we have another huge responsibility is to make sure that the products are safe for the consumers. So we're doing all of the quality assurance, making sure it's labeled appropriately and in compliant packaging to go to market. Other responsibilities and functions that we have is to actually give back the brands that we work with analytics, visibility to what's happening in the marketplace so that they can make the right decisions about what their next SKUs should be or how much inventory to have on hand or what their the next, any demand-based analytics that could help them drive their business to success.
Yeah, one thing really worth emphasizing is, and we're very proud of our distribution company, but at no time ever in the history of the cannabis industry has anybody ever walked into a dispensary and said, I would like a Mammoth distribution product. What Mammoth distribution products do you have? I understand their logistics is amazing. So we're there behind the scenes. We know we need to get it in. We need to have the footprint. We need to educate. But at the end of the day, it is the power of the brand because you might be able to get somebody to try something once. And often we're not able to get something in a dispensary without the bud tenders and the managers and the buyers trying it, going, you know what, I like this. And I think other people will like it. And you can get people potentially to try something once, but if they don't come back and ask for it, then you're not going to be able to keep it in that dispensary, and then it's going to be very hard to get it into other dispensaries. So we always want to go back as first and foremost is have a great product. It has to be compliant because otherwise it doesn't even get in. Retailers have gotten very good and been very discerning to the point of being kind of crazy in some cases, but to make sure that they feel that it's passed every single aspect of what they consider compliant.
Yeah, I would just echo what everyone else has said. It's effectively being a leveraging platform, or an enabling platform, I should say. So one of the things that PACX did is we sponsored a large consumption event, and we paid for every one of our brands to come down, or every single one of our brands to come down and sit in front of the consumers. So we sponsored the Emerald Cup, and we paid for all 21 brands that we represent to sit there. We covered the expense of that event so that they could be there in front of all of their consumers and get that real-time feedback to understand what the market really is, what the consumers are looking for, the dialogue between the consumers and the retailers. And being able to do that, I think, in various ways across platforms, across the state, is really, that's what we do as distributors, beyond all of the other technicalities that we have to do. It's really being a leveraging platform.
Great. So what advice do you have for brands in terms of getting them ready for distribution? So I'm sure brands reach out or producers reach out and they are looking for a distributor, and they may or may not be a right fit for you based on whatever criteria you have. So what would you tell brands that you look for and that you expect before they're really ready for a distribution partner?
Sure, I'm happy to start off. I guess the first advice would be make sure you like your distribution partner. At the end of the day, companies are built with people, and you got to make sure you get along well with that organization and you're kind of value aligned and mission aligned and kind of what you're trying to achieve. One thing we know for certain in this industry, it's that even though we're in this permanent regulation phase, it's going to change and change and change and change. And you're going to have problem after problem after hiccup, and you have to work through those. We've had a lot of challenges with packaging and labeling and different changes and different perspectives from different dispensaries. And working through those, I think, is one of the most important things you can do. I think from a distributor perspective, picking the right one that has the scale to really serve the entire state or specific regions if you want to divvy it up with different people, making sure they have the right amount of capital to continue to grow. Distribution is a super capital intensive game, and especially to do it at scale at the pace that California needs it. So I think ensuring that the distributor that you choose is going to be around for the long term, and you're working with people that you kind of want to work with on a day-to-day basis. So 2 simple rules.
And do your homework. Distributors are different. And so if you're going to a distributor and their emphasis is on the medicinal and yours is on the party, it might not be a good fit. Make sure if you're bringing a product to them that your packaging is compliant. Because if you come in and it's got all sorts of medical claims and so forth, they're going to think this is going to be a lot more work working with these people. make sure your product has been tested before and coming in, because the one thing about distributors, the distribution model generally is a sort of a game of a lot of numbers. You carry a number of brands, a number of different SKUs. That means you're dealing with a lot of different people and competing interests. And if one tries to be the tall blade and dominate the time, it really can make it difficult for everything else. So I think what he says is exactly right. Never underestimate the people concept. Somebody might like your product, but as you're leaving, they're sitting there thinking, I don't want to have to deal with this guy or this gal. That's not going to serve you well.
I would recommend having a business plan. A lot of people slap a label on a package and say, this is my brand. So actually, have some forecasting, figure out how much inventory, have projections of what you'd like to sell when you get out to market, and that will help all of us. I second the packaging, because the majority of packaging that comes through shows up the first revision. They've already ordered tons of it, and we're looking at it, and it's all wrong. So hire an attorney, have them look at the packaging, or get a compliance person, and then come talk to a distributor and make sure that they approve your packaging. And then the big final thing that I would say, if you want to go to market, is read the regulations, or at least have somebody that read them, because a lot of companies have not read them, and we spend a lot of time educating the companies or the brands to work with them.
Yeah, I would agree with what everyone has said. The other component would be really think about what you're getting ready to do. If you are launching a brand, that's not just a brand. You need to create a message. You need to create a vision. You need to communicate that out to the market. And again, going back to the enabling platform, you create marketing plans for your products. You pull your distributor into that, particularly when you're receiving some sort of sales service from them. What we noticed on the front end when we brought on a lot of the small legacy farmers, the small batch farmers, is that we were investing somewhere between $20,000 and $40,000 per brand that we brought on, just trying to build momentum for them in the marketplace. And that takes time. And that's another thing that needs to be understood from people, from brands or from entities that are trying to create brands in the market, is that this is a heavily congested space. Everybody is here attempting to sell cannabis. And you need to not only have these differentiators and so on, but you also need to have a message that will resonate. And you have to understand that for something to resonate, it takes time. X amount of impressions for someone to recall. That's a process. So if you expect to show up to a distributor on, say, a Friday, and they're going to pick up your inventory, don't expect sales on Monday. And that happens a lot. Hey, you guys have had my product for 3 days now. What's going on? What's the market? What's the market intelligence?
Where's my money?
Yeah, where's my money? Yeah, it's at the state. The big thing is making sure that there's a plan. Going back to some of the earlier comments that were made, you've got to really show up with a plan. You have to understand that this is a team. It is a huge team effort. It is a huge team event. If you're going to have a marketing plan, communicate that to your distributor, because they can show up and they can be the sales team that backs up whatever collateral media that you're putting out there. This is all coordinated efforts, and that's one of the things that distributors have to do. We do the education, we do the review, we do the compliance check, we do logistics, we do hand-holding, we do everything to get something to market. The best way to see a distributor is as a synthesizer. And we have to take chaos and we have to turn it into something palatable and digestible on the retail side. And it's a process, and understand that it's something that needs to be worked through. There's so many different ways to go about this, and there's only a handful of them that are correct.
So you've all alluded to various different services and value propositions that these different business models have and may offer. There's certainly a selection of different services depending on the distributor a brand might go and work with. So how do we place a value on those services as a whole or individually? I know some business models are kind of a la carte, and you can leverage certain aspects of what a distributor has to offer, and others are more comprehensive in terms of a flat rate for kind of the whole package. And so, I've heard rates anywhere from 5 to 10% when you're talking about just straight transportation. 10 to 20% if it's a combination of transport and warehousing logistics, and as high as 20, 25, 30% for that full service warehousing, logistics, and sales and brand support. So how would you say, what would you say is the appropriate value for those services, and to give people an expectation of what, how they would approach a conversation with the distributor, but also how to evaluate one distributor from the next based on the service that they're getting?
I think that should be answered by anyone other than me right now.
I think one of the first things is making sure that you, going back to Felipe's point, understand the rules, and then ask your distributor if they understand the rules. There's many times where we've had to explain the law to another distributor, and I think what you should do is find certain points that you want to ask them. You need to do a competency test. I'm basically trusting this person I'm putting my well-being in this person's hands. I have done everything I can to create a high-quality representation of what I believe is the best product out there. And I'm going to give you the best of what I've got. How do I know whether or not you can give me the best that I expect, that you can reciprocate? And you have to be able to know that these people are technically competent. You shouldn't have to question whether or not they can do logistics. If they can't do the logistics, then that should be a short conversation. From there, I think it's really understanding their sales makeup. What is it that they can do for me on the sales front? Are they going to provide demo services? And recognizing how much of that you need to lean on them for, and how much of that you plan to do yourself. It's really a negotiation. You should see it as an open negotiation, saying, I'm going to bring, I, the brand, am going to bring my sales team, and I just need your demo. But I'd say you're going to see price points start to get a little bit more competitive. And it's hard to say whether or not they'll go up or down. I think with the consolidation that's going to happen, you're going to see some of them go up, because a lot of the technically proficient operators are going to remain, and those that are not proficient are going to disappear. And that space is going to get a lot more complicated as we continue to evolve this marketplace. There's going to be more retail outlets, there's going to be more delivery services, and eventually there's going to be long hauls headed out to other states. And really, at the end of the day, you want to understand how capable that team is that you're relying on. And if they are competent, you should really... It's actually pretty hard to explain how many different things the distributors have to do that really a brand doesn't see on a daily basis. But expect that when you walk into these negotiations, that number is going to land somewhere around 20 to 25% for full service. That's what you should show up with as a budget. 25% should be what you expect in the middle, and anything that you get below that is a win.
I would say look at the contract. So after you've gotten to see the facility, meet some of the team, look over their distribution services agreement. You can tell a lot about a company just by reading that agreement. We've actually talked about standardizing the distribution contracts, so it's very easy for you to read and compare distributor to distributor. So hopefully that'll happen in the upcoming year or this year. And so that would be probably another great thing if we can all have, just like real estate, where you look at the form, it's in the same place no matter which mortgage company you worked with or which realtor you worked with.
It's also important to note that if your brand is doing $100,000 a month, that maybe even taking 50%, the person's going to be losing. Yet if you're doing a couple of $1 million a month, it might be 10% is too much. So kind of either breaking it out so there's flat fees or there's breaks on percentages or so forth. And again, a lot of it really depends on how much work you're asking them to do. And the reason I was dodging the question a little earlier is we have a little bit different model, and it's certainly not going to say it's a better model or an inferior model. It's just the one we take, which is every brand that we work with, we've invested in and taken an equity position. One is because we want them to have the resources, because if we're out there distributing and we go to them and say, it'd be great if you did X, Y, Z, we don't want to look across the table and say, well, we don't have the money, go sell some stuff and then we can do it. The second and the more important thing is that we wanted the long-term interests to be aligned. And so we want to make it where if they're successful, we're successful. Similarly, if they're cut, we bleed. As a distributor, sometimes what happens, I call this the distribution paradox for brands. A distributor goes in there carrying your brand, and the dispensary says, you know what? We don't think we're going to carry this one, but we're going to carry this other one from you. Well, for that salesperson there, they've made their commission. And it's really tough on them to say, no, 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 thank you for that order, but so forth, because they're just trying to keep that footprint and so forth. And yet, from the brand's point of view, you don't want the distributor to come back, go, good news, bad news. Bad news is they're not carrying you anymore. Good news is they're carrying something else we distribute. So that's how we went ahead and tried to address it. Others have addressed it in other ways, but we look again to make an investment in equity position.
It just occurred to me that you should also look at their brand portfolio to see how you rank amongst the other brands that they carry. Does it make sense for you to work with this distributor? Or do they have other brands that would cannibalize that piece of your business?
And I would add that 20 to 25% number is for a brand new brand without any history. If you have history, as stated, that obviously gives you a great deal more leverage and negotiating power. And it also makes things a lot more cut and dry for the distributor. So to that end, you should really do whatever you can to see what demand there is for your product in the market, and then start talking to distributors again as well. You don't want to show up without a very good understanding or at least some form of context for your brand in the market, because we have people that show up and they had some contracted product that they don't really know about and don't believe in, and we just, they're like, okay, make this big. It's like, maybe talk to somebody else.
All right. Well, our kind of last question, and then we'll open it up for some Q&A. What role do you think that California brands and distributors will have in this kind of national and global market that is emerging? And kind of what do you think that timeline looks like? Do you personally have a vision for that for your company or some of the brands you work with? Like, what's the conversation right now around expanding state to state? The concept of interstate commerce opening up, and even global?
Obviously, ideally, we'd want interstate commerce to open up because we have one of the greatest producing states in the nation. But for now, since we have to work within the confines of each state and the regulations, California has established probably one of the best frameworks when you look at the regulations in the other states. This one was clearly guided by people that have been in the industry for a long time. And we have a vision for being able to have a platform to take your brand into multiple states. So if you're produced here and distributed here, to provide that same experience in another state, that's something that if you want to build a big national brand, you need. So from distribution, I think we have a responsibility to build that multi-state platform.
Yeah, stated simply, California is the largest and I think most important cannabis market in the world. It is what Hollywood is to movies, what New York City is to publishing, what Paris and Rome is to fashion. And so if you can, it's a very big and expensive and difficult state to win, but if you can, that will help you in the other states, that will help you in other countries, more than, let's say, having a winning brand in Massachusetts or Florida and then bringing it into California. And so on a pragmatic basis, that means as you're allocating, if you're in multiple states and you're allocating marketing budgets, it's worth to allocate more to California than you might otherwise do because it really will help on your licensing. And we see that on the basis of just in twofold. One is the number of queries that we get from other states, people wanting to license. And there was somebody from Bang earlier this morning, and people were saying, we want to license you. And he said, well, that's great, but why do you want us? And they said, because people ask for your product in this other state. And that speaks volumes.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to echo some of the sentiments here, California for sure is the most important market of the nation and probably the world. California also produces 2/3 of the nation's fruits and vegetables. So I think when statewide borders come down, all cultivation moves down here. Manufacturing moves to California too. You don't want to be shipping biomass to other states to be manufactured. Everything will be really close to the biomass. And the way we think about national expansion is hyper-focused on California. We're building massive scale on our upstream operations, building relationships with the farmers, helping them a lot with their accounting services, their compliance services, their legal services. We've also partnered with an amazing lab called Cascadia Labs at our facility and offering really large bulk discounts to our farmers. So finding ways for them to stay in the ecosystem and building that infrastructure so that when the states do come online or the statewide borders do go off or do disappear, we're ready for that national expansion, right? And the portfolio that we're building is a very curated set of very desirable California brands that have California values at heart, that want to support the sun-grown ecosystem, the small farmer ecosystem, really the people that kind of built this industry. And we feel that building that really large portfolio here in California, putting those in the top ranking spots across all their categories, and really waiting for that moment. I think the Canadian public markets have created an artificial market dynamics where people think they can put flags in other states and use that to raise more money and raise more capital. I think a lot of people are going to be cut with a lot of small little assets in a bunch of little locations and not really building for the scale when the time comes. And that's what we're really focused on.
I would say as goes California, so goes the rest of the world. And that's what we kind of premised a lot of our business design on, understanding that once we get California dialed in, we can pretty well assume that whatever structure is adopted at the federal level is probably going to look somewhat similar to California. We are developing the precedent. This is the opportunity to establish a very large system that allows us to provide proof of concept to the federal government, and likely we'll have a fair segment of it adopted at the federal level. So for our operation, we are designed to scale not only nationally but internationally. What we did is invested heavily on our warehouse management system on the front end, ensuring that the ability to scale is not limited by our systems, but merely by our creativity.
Well, I want to say thank you to our panelists, all members of the Cannabis Distribution Association. We have Pacific Expeditors, Rise Logistics, Mammoth Distribution, and Flowcana. So I encourage you to reach out to these folks. And do we have time for questions?
We have time for one or two quick questions. Yes. Anybody? Anyone? All right. I see you, Chris. Here I come. I'm on my way. Here I go. Caller, are you there?
Thank you. Great panel. Chris Conrad here. I'm just wondering, in terms of distribution system, do we see the same kind of competition for shelf space in the cannabis industry as you like see at the grocery stores or whatever, where they're fighting for that right at the exit and so forth? And how does that work out and distributor versus people trying to do it on their own and so forth? I'd just like to address that. Thank you.
There's nothing preventing slotting in the regulations. So yes, shelf space is being bought and sold and traded and all sorts of things. It's extremely competitive. I also look at it like almost like the pharmaceutical reps that would go and hit a doctor. You've got to think there's almost one distributor for every retail store right now. So if I were going to say anything that we need to focus on in California in 2019, it's bring on more retail. We have a lot of consumers. We need a lot more retail.
Totally.
And a really small footprint in the stores. It's not like a grocery store that you have a lot of shelf space to offer to begin with, so the footprint's much smaller.
Question over here. It seems like more and more distributors are sort of building their own proprietary technologies. It seems, as you said, there's a tremendous amount of expenses already with being a distributor, and even more trying to build your own proprietary software. Where do you sort of bridge the gap between what you build yourselves and what you buy? I mean, my assumption is you want to be a distributor, not a software company.
That's an interesting question, actually, and we took a very unique and different approach from day one to actually bring a lot of our technology in-house. I think to your point, for sure, people that are doing purely distribution, there's a lot of software out there that does warehouse management, route optimization, whatever you call it. For us specifically, and I definitely don't want to speak for the crowd, we're very deeply connected with our supply chain and our partners. So we have a lot of technology and a lot of tools for our farmers to onboard their inventory, to view their inventory, to see what products are selling in which locations and which stores and which regions. We give them ideas of what to grow. We want to try to turn our supply chain to being what it is today, that farmers grow whatever they want, and then we have to figure out how to sell it. And we want to basically use our data and our tools to really inform the upstream production so that we're actually doing demand production rather than whatever the farmer wants. So we've built a lot of our technology in-house. The way we kind of look at business and generally at Flowcana as we look at the world and we make our own hypotheses. Sometimes those hypotheses are proven and disproven. And we look ahead and try to kind of figure out what the next bottlenecks are. Right? Lab testing was a huge bottleneck that we have in this industry today. That's why we made a deep partnership with a lab. I see technology and a lot of this software's out there are tracking multiple states and multiple jurisdictions and multiple regulations. So we always thought that technology was going to be very hard for us to scale, especially how complex our model is, to really be able to depend on other people to make the changes that California will require. So specifically for us, because we're so deeply connected to our farmer base all the way to our retailers, it made a lot of strategic sense for us to build our own stuff.
We felt a little bit similar tact and a little bit different from some of the probably smarter people on this panel than me, but it is very hard to be a good distributor, and so we felt we should put the focus in that. The same way that I don't think I would go to a Microsoft and ask them to distribute cannabis. So we look for people who their sole focus is developing amazing software and then look to leverage and work on their efforts.
And I have the opposite take. So if you work with a software company and a product manager to design software about something very specific, it's really challenging for them to make it as efficient as you can if you are both software and an operator. The other aspect related to this is a lot of the companies that build software are either publicly traded, they're venture capital funded, and we've seen them decide overnight, hey, we cannot provide services to the cannabis industry. So until the federal legality changes, you're at risk if you're running on someone else's platform that one day could say, you know what, we don't want to do this anymore, you're done. What do you tell your clients in that state? So we believe that we should own our platform and build it.
In regard to the brands, the small farmer brands that have taken some investment up front to build that brand, how do you foresee appellation rights factoring into that, and whether or not it will become easier to support the branding for small farmers when it comes to distribution? Because it sounds like there's, as someone said, a lot of traffic and that, lots of players and hard to enter as a small farmer.
So the question is, do you identify there to be value in the appellations, or?
How do you see appellation rights factoring in, and perhaps, I guess I have my own viewpoint, easing the ability for an emerging brand or small farmer to be able to cut through some of the traffic and distinguish themselves because they have appellation of origin or some other protected category that I know people are working on that potentially could assist these brands?
I would say,
How powerful is an appellation, right? Is it, if you have a small business but you get to call it Humboldt Grown or Mendocino Gold, is that,
Yes.
it gives you more sway in the marketplace?
yeah, it's huge. I would put every effort that you could into creating appellations. That's where you can create a recognizable and unique identifier to your brand. I mean, if you look at somebody who's creating something from Stag's Leap, Vice, Rutherford, those abilities to identify very high-end production regions, it is easily something that creates differentiation and identifies a certain level of value, not only for the manner in which you produce it, all the way through to the connection that a consumer has to that particular region. I think appellations is a very, very valuable initiative that should be furthered, and it will definitely change the scene of cannabis across California.
I was just going to echo that and also say I think the appellations will be critical too for furthering the value of California and Emerald Triangle and regional and specific cannabis as we do expand into a national and global market. So it's critical. Senator McGuire has a bill that just came out last week to kind of further clarify the point of origin for the appellations of origin, which is great. And there's a program called the Mendocino Appellations Project, which is expanding its name, I think, to be the California Appellations Project. So I would strongly recommend anyone to get involved with that group, support that group. It's a small, self-funded organization that takes donations and contributions, but it's critical for small farmers. And I don't know, Mikey, I thought you might wanted to say something as well.
Yeah, for sure. I'm actually very bullish on appellations. I think it's certainly the long game, as Lauren says. I think it's going to be more and more valuable when we have the national marketplace to play in. In fact, one of the slides on my deck recently is, if you look at the wine industry, nationwide, 4% of the volume of grapes come from Napa and Sonoma of the entire wine industry, yet Napa and Sonoma wines command 54% of the revenue. So while they produce a very little amount of volume, the revenue and the premium that they're getting is substantial. And to Lauren's point, I love the Mendocino Appellations Project. There's an incredible groups in the Emerald Triangle, HCGA being one of them, MCGA, ICFA. There's a couple of groups kind of trying to coalesce and find ways to collaborate, and we're trying to figure out how to really put forward the Appellations program and also do it in a way that the consumer can understand.
But the onus is on you to make that be something that the consumer understands. So when they walk in, they ask for it, or if they see it, they recognize. So band together with others and yours. So if they come in, they see a difference between that and something maybe grown in a warehouse, stinky warehouse in LA County.
And let's not forget, there are regions of the state that are globally known for being some of the best sources for cannabis in the world.
Exactly. I hate to cut it off. This is a great discussion. Let's hear it once again for Lauren Fraser, all the panelists.